Anyway, without further ado, we have assisting me in the Opani department, all friends to the show, one of my regular, Robert Weiner, Democratic strategist, columnist, and former communications director for Clinton drug czar General Barry McCaffrey. Bob, good to have you back.
It's a pleasure to be with you, Alan. I was going to say what an objective set of clips you played at the beginning until you put down the ones on the side that showed that there is a cultural problem that still exists in this country.
Yeah, but not connected to the case that's governing our conversation, and that's what's intellectually disingenuous as well as vapid. Assisting me also?
Very connected when the president said...
Really? Then why is it when the president's own FBI says this case was not about race, that doesn't seem to matter? Why is it when the family attorney, Darryl Parks, the family attorney of the Martins, comes out and says this was not about race, that apparently doesn't matter? And even the prosecution that was trying to nail Zimmerman's ass said this is not about race. All of a sudden, we're supposed to believe it's about race. And in my estimation, this is too bizarre. But let me introduce my next guest. Got to be courteous here. David Mastio joins us, forum editor for USA Today. Formerly, he was op-ed editor for the Washington Times. David, good to have you back as well. How are you?
Great to be here. I'm fabulous. Having
Excellent.
spent the whole day focused on, the birth of a baby rather than Trayvon Martin.
Really, the royal baby, of course. You know what I think is troubling here, Bob, and you and I've had this discussion before, and you've actually agreed with me on this, because I've referenced this before, I've written about it before, but I talk about how bizarre I think some people can be when they seem unable to discern the difference between issues relevant to racial conflict versus conflict that just happens to transpire between two people who are not of the same race. In other words, a black guy and a white guy can disagree over the same things that might be the case for two blacks, two whites, two Hispanics, two Asians, or two Semitics. But according to some abridged thinkers, Obama included, if they're not of the same race, it's a racial conflict. I think this is bizarre and unevolved. Tell me all the ways I'm wrong, Bob Weiner.
Well, the judge wouldn't allow race, but then he allows profiling. What were we looking at? Something other than race? The judge said no, stand your ground, and then juror B37 says, oh, well, we talked about stand your ground as one of the bases of the case. So when President Obama said that he was followed, that Trayvon Martin was him 35 years ago, and Hannity comes back, talk about the race baiter, and says, well, was he in the Choon gang? And then he later has to back off and say he was jesting. The right wing has taken this way too far, and yes, of course, race was a major factor in that case.
The Washington Post referenced how he used to hang out, and they self-described as the Choom gang. Why would you say what you just said? You make it sound as if someone came up with a racially disparaging comment, and but for the fact that I'm very well read and I keep up on most of these things, you would have gotten away with it.
Did you listen to Hannity's comment?
No, I'm asking you a direct question. No. You don't get to detour the discussion onto some self-indulgent road of escapism. You don't get to detour the discussion onto some self-indulgent road of escapism. Point, counterpoint. You made an assertion that because somebody referred to the Choom gang, that makes them a racist. And I'm telling you, the Washington Post described the fact that Obama and his friends would self-describe as the Choom gang. They would point to themselves and call themselves the Choom gang. But because somebody else picks up on it who's not an African American, you just endeavor to try to characterize that as a racial slur on Battle Line.
Oh, but Hannity put none of the context in that you just did. He just made it look like Obama was a black criminal.
You did not get away with it, and you know it. And that was unfortunate. You shouldn't have tried, especially on a show like mine. David Mastio, to you.
He had to withdraw it and saying he was only in jest.
Upon a return, we're going to go right to David Mastio because we got to go talk about this a little bit more than shift to the IRS. Folks, you are with Battle Line, Main Street Radio Network. I'm Alan Nathan. Bob Weiner and David Mastio will stick with us. We'd like you to as well.
I think what he was trying to teach, a teachable moment for the American public, was that the frustration of the black community here is not just about the verdict. It's about this culture of suspicion that follows black people around. And let me quote what he said. He said, there are very few African-American men in the country who haven't had the experience of being followed when shopping in a department store. That includes me. He's just asking conservatives, especially, to say, we admit there is a problem.
I thought it was a political speech addressed to his constituency on the left, which I thought was unfortunate, even though it sounded like a philosophical speech addressed to the whole nation. Look, I've gave him and Holder credit all week for trying to de-racialize the issue. And what Obama did, I think, unfortunately, is to re-racialize it. The first statement he issued after the verdict on Saturday, I think it was to talk about the jury's, we have to honor what the jury had decided. And then he spoke about, helping our communities, thinking about our neighbors, and gun control. But it wasn't about race. And as we know from the trial, race was not an issue in the trial. The prosecution didn't speak of race. The jury said it wasn't an issue. Well, the FBI investigation didn't find any hint of racism.
Welcome back, everybody. Welcome back. Every year is Alan Nathan, the militant moderate. Once again, this is the Oasis for those who have an aversion to the left, right, black, white, two-dimensional approach. First, you were listening to the musings of Bill Maher. He was commenting on the president's racial speech, insisting that there is a culture of suspicion about black men in America. Following that, you heard from conservative columnist Charles Krauthammer on Obama's comments as well. Pointing out that the investigation from the FBI showed that there was not even a hint of racism. So we're having a grandiose disconnect on race once again in Washington, D.C. Nothing new there, I guess. We have assisting me in the opining department. Old friends of the show, my regulars. First, Bob Weiner, Democrat strategist, columnist, and former communications director for Clinton Drug Czar General Barry McCaffrey. Good to have you back, Bob.
Thanks so much, Alan.
Normally appearing with Bob, we have Amy Ridenour. We look forward to her coming back real soon. In her stead, we have David Mastio. Amy Ridenour, by the way, of course, the CEO of the National Center for Public Policy Research. Joining us right now, David Mastio, another old friend of the program, forum editor for USA Today. Formerly, he was op-ed editor at the Washington Times. And, David, I promised to get to you upon a return, and that's what I'm doing right now. You heard what these gentlemen just had to say. Kind of reminded me of the disconnect of some years ago with Joe Biden. You remember in 2008 when he said that Obama was, quote, the first mainstream African-American who is articulate and bright and clean and nice-looking. And then he also had another brush with bigotry when he said in July of that year, quote, you cannot go to a 7-Eleven or a Dunkin' Donuts unless you have a slight Indian accent. I'm not joking. And, of course, not to be outdone, we have, we remember some of those less than endearing observations by Hillary Clinton. I remember some years ago, I think it was in 2004, she said that she stereotyped, really, Indian Americans by saying that Mahatma Gandhi ran a gas station in St. Louis. Now, then you get, of course, Congressman Jim Moran, who is blaming the Jews for our going into Iraq. And it goes on and on and on. My point is that when it comes to bigotry, it looks as if the left is always willing to give a pass to its own for that which it would never tolerate from others. Or am I overstating this, Dave Mastio?
I think you're overstating it. I mean, I think both parties all the time try to hold the other party to standards that they do not themselves uphold.
I agree. Both parties do it. They'll each always give a pass to their own for that which they would never tolerate from others. But I focused on the Democrats this time because they're the ones doing it as it relates to race.
And I think what Krauthammer said about Obama's speech, about it being a speech to his partisans and not the high-minded speech that he was trying to make it out to. Every president, when they make statements or they give a speech in the Oval Office or they speak before Congress, they're trying to talk to multiple audiences at the same time. And so the president had a partisan message for his black followers. Well, every president has a partisan message for whatever group they're trying to address, and clearly the Trayvon Martin case is of paramount importance to African Americans right now. So that he had a message for them is, I can't imagine how he couldn't.
I can imagine him having a better one. I can imagine him remembering that he's the president of the entire country, not one demographic. I'll give you an example, because I brought this up before as well. Bob, let me go to you on this one. Why is it that our half-black, half-white president is called African-American, but that the half-Hispanic, half-white Zimmerman is simply that white guy who killed Trayvon? I mean, it appears that there are agendas being served way beyond anything having to do with the facts of the case, or am I being too cynical, Bob Weiner?
Well, first, David, hello, actually, because we've worked together, and what you're saying today, your objectivism and recognizing the culture to African Americans is I think, why you and I did so well in the Washington Times in terms of writing op-eds and working together with you. Alan, the reason is because the Census Bureau says that if you're part African American, you declare you're African American. That's actually what the rule in the Census Department is. And the African American community, and you remember I was the spokesman for Conyers and Wrangell.
Oh, wait, so you're saying the same is not applied to the Hispanic community? You say that if you're half black, half white, the Census Bureau tells you to say you're African American.
And therefore,
but if you're half Hispanic and half white, you're not supposed to say you're Hispanic.
Absolutely can say you're Hispanic, and actually you are Hispanic by definition and by your rights in terms of minority privileges that you have in this country.
Then why is it, for the purposes of the discussion surrounding Trayvon Martin, we have in the form of Zimmerman that white guy as opposed to that Hispanic guy?
Well, it wasn't that white guy. And in fact, the juror there was no black juror, but there was a mixed Hispanic juror on that jury and 5 white women. And so there was no representative of the Trayvon Martin constituency and the cultural problems that the president raised in his speech, which is why he raised the question of what would have happened if this were a reverse situation. Guy out there was white, would Zimmerman really have gone after him? And the answer, he said, even if it's mixed and not understood, but the answer is probably no, he wouldn't have gone after him. That's what the president, and he was right.
Right? To what extent? Go ahead.
That, the president is totally wrong, because if Zimmerman is anything, he is an overzealous wannabe cop. And he had a reputation for going after every different kind of people in his neighborhood, reporting every kind of ridiculous issue to the police. He would even call the police when somebody left their garage door up. The man was overzealous to a fault, and the idea that he would go after a black but not go after a white is just crazy, and the facts argue totally against it.
David, on his 911 calls, all you can do is listen. They tried to walk around it, but he said Coons and those people. That was right on his 911 call.
No, he didn't. That was never out of the case. He never said that. Oh my God, it's terrible you would say that. The FBI, why is it you know things the FBI don't? Why is it you know things the FBI don't? And you know what else all strips away credibility from those on this side? Was the doctored tapes that we had in which you first had audio with Zimmerman talking about that black guy, and then we'd later find out it was only in response to the dispatcher asking a specific question as to what the guy looked like. He said, is he white, is he black, is he Hispanic? And Zimmerman responded, I think he's a black guy. But the way the tape played it, they took out sections of it and they strewn it together to present a conversation that never took place. Surely, Bob, even you found that offensive, yes?
Surely you didn't listen to the tape, not hearing him talk about Coons and those people, Alan, because I did listen to the tapes.
Dave Mastio, correct me, is there a tape where he has said these things? Just because I haven't heard it doesn't mean it exists, but I've been following this pretty closely. I've never heard anything that resembles that on a tape. Have you, Dave Mastio?
I have seen it fairly thoroughly knocked down by reputable sources.
Thank you. And not only that, let's remember something, Bob. The only person who supposedly said anything disparaging of a racial nature was apparently Trayvon Martin, because according to Rachel Chantel, he referred to Zimmerman as that creepy ass cracker.
Right, but she was lying about all kinds of things, so we can't pick out the thing.
But do you think she would lie about that which makes her guy look bad? I don't know.
And
I can see her lying about things that would make him look good, but do you see her lying about things that would make him look bad? That seems counterintuitive.
Well, I'm just going to leave her out of my thinking because she's, pretty clearly confused about exactly what happened.
And, Alan, what would you say about some guy chasing you with a gun as he was chasing you? How would you talk to him?
Oh, listen, I'm glad you brought that up, because I'm looking at the clock. I wanted to cover so many other things, but I just don't have the time. Let's talk a little bit about this. Let's talk about these lawsuits, because I think that gets to the heart of the matter. Now, it appears as if, he's going to, well, he did win the criminal case, and it looks as if the DOJ may dodge the hate crime charge. But it appears as if Zimmerman has a more than credible case, not Zimmerman, but rather the Martin family has a more than credible case when it comes to a general civil lawsuit. I mean, because but for the poor choices of Zimmerman, Trayvon Martin would most assuredly still be alive. Bob, do you see a civil suit being brought forward by the Martin family?
Yes, I do, and I think they will win for the very reason you described. The bar is lower.
I agree. I concur with myself. Isn't that surprising? I think he would win that. Dave Mastio, what about you?
I have absolutely no idea. I just haven't looked into it.
I say he would win that. He would win that. But the DOJ trying to put forward hate crime, there's nothing there. And all of a sudden, if they decide to press charges, even though there's nothing there, that's mob rule resonating in the Capitol.